Resident Evil.
Before we jump into things today, I have to give a quick massive shout out to the legend Cody Leach. This tier list was heavily inspired by him, and honestly, I'm just so pumped that his gaming channel is finally back in action. Seriously, if you aren't subscribed to him yet, go fix that. But today, we're tackling the ultimate bioweapon and ranking every mainline Resident Evil game. We're going all the way from the classic Spencer Mansion straight through to the brand new nightmare that is Resident Evil Requiem. We're using a custom RE4 merchant themed tier list because why not? Ranging from the absolute peak S tier, Stranger, now that's a weapon, I can't do accents, sorry, down to the D tier, just not my style. I've been replaying a ton of these lately, jumping between the PS5 on the couch to late night sessions in the dark on the Steam Deck, and I've definitely got some strong opinions on how these hold up. So let's get right into it. Pardon my crazy hair. Just had an awesome motorcycle ride. Things are warming up here in Utah, but helmet hair is a thing. First up, let's get it poppin' with Resident Evil 1 Remake. And because I don't have the original OG, it's because I never really played the original to completion. And the remake of Resident Evil 1, or this one in particular, is kind of my childhood. I didn't have a lot of experience with the OG. So that's why it's not on this list, because I don't think I've played it enough to give a reputable take on it. So we're jumping right into Resident Evil 1 Remake. The pros here are definitely undeniable. It essentially took everything great about the 1996 original and dialed the atmosphere up to 11. The pre-rendered backgrounds hold up incredibly well, even today, making every hallway look like a Gothic painting. The introduction of Crimson Heads added a massive layer of kind of panic to the backtracking, and suddenly leaving a body on the floor became a massive gamble, and it was part of a strategy to make the game easier or harder for yourself. Plus, the addition of Lisa Trevor tied the lore together beautifully while giving us a kind of tragic, unkillable stalker. The cons, well, tank controls just aren't for everyone. Trying to navigate fixed camera angles while a zombie is lunging at you can feel incredibly clunky to modern sensibilities. But for pure unadulterated survival horror, it's honestly a masterpiece. I'm suggesting this goes straight into the A tier. Thank you. Thank you. It is the foundation of everything that came after and what we come to know and love from all awesome, mostly awesome games of this somewhat consistent franchise. All right, moving on to the original 1998 Resident Evil 2. The pros, it brilliantly expanded the scope from a single claustrophobic mansion to the sprawling, burning streets of Raccoon City and the iconic police department. The zapping system, where your actions in the A scenario actually affect the item placements and boss encounters in the B scenario, was mind-blowing at the time, and it gave massive replay value. The soundtrack is iconic, and the introduction of Leon and Claire gave us two of the best protagonists in gaming. The cons, kind of similar going off of the first game. The controls in early 3D models have aged pretty heavily, and inventory management could be a tedious chore with those extremely limited slots. But nostalgia aside, it's a legendary sequel. I'm putting this in the A tier. Ha ha ha. Thank you. I really need to stop doing that. It's probably gonna get old and probably already has. But yeah, solid A tier. Now let's talk about the Resident Evil 2 remake. So the pros, this right here is the absolute gold standard of how to remake a classic video game without taking out its soul. The over-the-shoulder camera completely modernized the gameplay while keeping the intense, kind of slow burn survival horror roots intact. Mr. X's dynamic AI is utterly terrifying. Hearing his heavy footsteps echoing through the RPD halls while you're just trying to solve a puzzle is peak gaming anxiety, if you want to call it that. The gore engine is also unbelievably satisfying. I still remember seeing that first trailer and just being shocked at how detailed and awesome the zombies were, and letting you dynamically shoot chunks off incoming zombies. So the cons, they definitely fumbled the A and B scenarios compared to the original. The overlapping timelines don't make nearly as much sense, and some of the classic music was sorely missed unless you paid for the swap. Even with those flaws, this is an easy S tier. Stranger, now that's a weapon. For me, that is S tier, going our first S tier category. All right, so now let's talk about Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. It introduced the live selection system where you had to make split-second choices that permanently altered your path. And of course, we have the big bad Nemesis himself. He was the first stalker enemy that could actually like sprint, use weapons, and follow you through doors, which kind of shattered the safety net we had built up over the first 2 games. It was genuinely terrifying. The randomized item placements kept you on your toes, even on a 3rd or 4th playthrough. Some of the bad things, it's undeniably feels more like a massive expansion to RE2 rather than a full-fledged sequel. It's relatively short, especially in the remake, and a lot of assets were reused to get it out the door quickly, and that's pretty apparent, you can tell. I think this fits perfectly, though, into our first B tier, not enough cash, stranger. Because while it's good, it really started the series shift toward more high-octane action over horror, which people love it more for that, people love it less for that. All right, so moving right along, we have the Resident Evil 3 remake. It looks gorgeous, and the dodge mechanic that originated in the classic game was perfectly refined here, in my opinion. Jill Valentine's redesign is fantastic, and her voice acting is top notch. Carlos also gets a substantial and genuinely fun portion of the game to shine, turning the hospital defense section into a kind of a top-tier action horror moment. Some of the negatives, to me, the cut content is brutal. They completely removed the iconic clock tower and the park, making an already short game feel like a rapid sprint to the finish line when it already felt pretty rapid in the original. And Nemesis, he feels way too scripted compared to Mr. X in the RE2 remake. You mostly just run forward until a cinematic explosion triggers. And because of the missed potential, I'm dropping this one into C tier. I'll buy it at a high price, begrudgingly. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I have to do it. I have to do it. All right. And getting into one of my favorite games of all time, the original Resident Evil 4. Some of the goods, it revolutionized third-person shooters entirely. The over-the-shoulder perspective, the laser sight aiming, the dynamic difficulty system, and the incredibly campy, but always fun, iconic dialogue. Where's everyone going? Bingo? It's lightning in a bottle. The pacing is legendary. It constantly is throwing entirely new scenarios and enemy types at you, from the village to the castle. The weapon upgrading system is ridiculously addictive, and it was just awesome to have okay weapons to start and just look forward to just making them, getting that RPG, baby, just mow through with unlimited ammo. So some of the negatives, there's not a ton, but the military island section drags on a bit too long, in my opinion, and having to babysit Ashley can occasionally spike your blood pressure for all the wrong reasons. The controls also lack the ability to like strafe or move while shooting, which I think is a good or a bad depending on how you looked at it. It definitely helped build up tension. You really had to be strategic and plan when you were gonna stop and shoot or run. But it definitely feels a bit rigid today with modern gaming, but it's a titan of the industry. I have so many fond memories of this as a child, and I think I like this over the remake just because when you have that first experience, I don't think any remake or any future edition can ever kind of reignite that magic. That's why I talk a lot about with like World of Warcraft. It's just something about that moment when you were there that can never be topped as much as we want it to be. It very rarely, if never, is. So Resident Evil 4, that's going into Stranger. Now that's a weapon. GameCube for life, by the way. I love playing this with a GameCube controller. But yeah, super fun. And then Capcom managed to remake perfection with the Resident Evil 4 remake. They actually improved on the original in meaningful ways. The knife parry system is the single best gameplay addition to the franchise has seen in years. Being able to deflect a pitchfork or catch a chainsaw blade completely revs up the combat loop. They also made Ashley a much more kind of compelling character and removed her dedicated health bar, which was a massive quality of life upgrade. Again, with this, some of the original's pure B-movie charm and iconic cheesy lines were kind of lost in translation to make the tone grittier and darker. Also, locking the U3 boss fight behind the Separate Ways DLC was a slight bummer, but honestly, it's still a flawless modern action game. S tier again, hands down. Can't be any lower. All right, now we're gonna take a little dip in quality with Resident Evil 5. The co-op, if you have a buddy, if you ever had one of those, is one of the most ridiculously fun, chaotic co-op experiences ever made. Boulder punching Chris Redfield and Sheva Alomar taking on hordes of infected in broad daylight was a massive visual shift. The Mercenaries mode is also arguably the most robust in the entire series. Some of the negatives, the AI, if you're forced to play this solo, which if you're like me, a lot of us were, Shiva's AI will consume all your first aid sprays and waste your magnum ammo like it's kind of going out of style. The horror aspect is also completely eradicated in this one, replaced by pure action blockbuster set pieces. Because the co-op carries it so hard though and is so fun, I'm gonna put it in the B tier. B tier. Haha. Not enough cash, stranger. All right. And then moving on down the list, we have Resident Evil 6. The sheer movement mechanics. You can slide, roll, shoot from your back and pull off crazy wrestling melee combos. When the combat clicks, it actually feels incredibly fluid. They had something there. The sheer amount of content across 4 different overlapping campaigns is massive, giving you iconic pairings like Leon and Helena or Chris and Pierce. Some of the negatives, it's an absolute bloated mess. The quick time events are relentless. The story is a convoluted global catastrophe, and the execution is just too Michael Bay. Feels like 4 separate mediocre games duct taped together, and none of them quite stick the landing. So I have to put this straight into the D tier. Just not my style. Sorry, but hey, we filled up every single tier, so no tier can be left out. All right, and then Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. So some of the pros, the return to pure terrifying horror, switching to the first-person perspective that was a massive risk that I honestly think overall saved the franchise. The Baker family is an incredible cast of villains, and the first half of the game inside that Louisiana mansion is some of the most anxiety-inducing, claustrophobic gameplay ever created, and I'll die on that hill at any time. Some of the cons, enemy variety is severely lacking. You're basically just fighting the same blobs of black molded for 10 hours. And the final act on the wreck ship really loses the incredible momentum built up by the Baker estate. So despite the weak third act, it's a masterclass in tension. So this one's going easily into A tier. Haha, thank you. All right, and we're going to the final 2. Resident Evil Village. It's essentially on a theme park. You get a gothic castle with vampires, a terrifying psychological dollhouse with a crazy, disturbing baby, a gross swamp monster, and a massive mechanical factory. I think it took the first-person engine of 7 and perfectly injected the action, pacing, merchant system and Tetris-style inventory management of RE4. So it took a lot of elements from past games and melded them in a great package. Plus, Lady Dimitrescu took over the internet for a reason. Some of the negatives, it heavily sacrifices the intense dread of RE7 for much more accessible action, making it a lot less scary overall. The Heisenberg factory section also feels visually monotonous and overstays its welcome. It's a phenomenal ride, but maybe a jack of all trades, master of none. I'm gonna suggest B tier, not enough cash, stranger. All right, and we're finally here at the end, the newest entry I've been having a blast with. Spoiler alert, I like it. Finally, the newly released Resident Evil 9 Requiem. It's doing something incredibly ambitious by kind of splitting the gameplay between Grace Ashcroft's kind of more tense first-person survival horror and then Leon's palate-cleansing third-person heavy action. It kind of bridges the gap between the 2 distinct eras of the franchise perfectly. The gore system is phenomenal. Enemies coming back as heavily mutated blister heads if you don't burn or dismember them properly, brings back that classic RE1 resource management stress. Returning to the ruins of Raccoon City is a kind of surreal love letter to the fans. Some of the negatives, it does suffer from serious pacing issues and padding. I think a lot of the objectives in the care center feel stretched a little bit to lengthen the runtime. And Grace's stalker enemy forces you into hiding sections that can interrupt the flow and slow down the game quite a bit, or if you suck like me. But it's an amazing nostalgia trip, even if it relies a bit too heavily on the callbacks. I think this lands solidly in the A tier. Haha, thank you. All right, and that about does it. Sorry for my terrible accent and impersonation routines. You probably got a little too much of that. But as always, I'm Kyler Ray. Thanks for stopping by and checking out the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I really like these tiers. I'm hopefully going to have some more awesome ones in the future. Again, big shout out to Cody Leach. I'll put a link in the description to go over there and comment and see what you think of his opinions on the games, which are much more intricate and fleshed out and he's a much better speaker than me. But yeah, that's going to do it. Peace. See you in the next one.